Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Amin. Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today we have a very special episode with a topic that is near and dear to my heart: the Remote Real Estate Academy. I launched this business last November with my friend and business partner, Nathan Murith. After almost 8 months in business, we decided to take a moment to reflect on all the work we've done so far and what we've been able to accomplish. We cover a lot of behind-the-scenes activity in building this business, including the origin story of how we met, what made us decide to partner up, what we spent the first 6 months doing, and what we have in store for the next 6 months. It was so fun to be able to capture this exciting moment in time and share what we've been working on behind the scenes. And of course, if you or anyone you know is interested in buying your first remote rental property, you can find information about the Remote Real Estate Academy at remoterealestateacademy.com. We are officially open for business. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today is a very special episode. I am joined by my good friend and now my business partner, Mr. Nathan Murith. You will recognize him from, I believe, episode 2 of this podcast when he came on as a guest, but we have now formally partnered up to launch the Remote Real Estate Academy, which we launched last November. So we're hoping to have a quick chat and just kind of share what we've been up to. And Nathan, welcome back. Good to see you.
Appreciate it, Aaron. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me again. And it's funny to say again because I was trying to think about this and I honestly couldn't remember when we last spoke in the context of this podcast. When I started looking into it and then I didn't get around to having time to do so. Glad to be back.
Yeah, so we went into a bunch of your origin story back in that episode, which I will link in the show description. Nathan and I have known each other for a couple of years now. And so the part of what I wanted to talk about in this episode is kind of origin story of how we got together, some of the stuff we worked on those first couple of years we knew each other, and then how we decided to team up. So just a little bit of context. Nathan and I met through a different mastermind program we were in, where we were paired up in a group of 4 people. And we met every Friday for, I think, almost 2 years. And the purpose of that was to just kind of share accountability updates. What are you working on? What areas are you stuck on? Where can we support each other? And what are some general bits of knowledge that might be useful to the other members of the group? So we got to establish this pretty intimate relationship up front and got to see how each other thought quite a bit. And we maybe share a little bit, because you were in that group before I was, of your experience just kind of entering the whole mastermind scene in general.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot to unpack here, and I find it to be an interesting story. But one of the, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here a bit in answering one of the questions that you asked originally, what made it so that we ultimately partnered up? But one thing that I noticed even before this mastermind that you're referring to, and this is no criticism of the communities and masterminds that we were part of, it's just things that I happened to notice. And for context, or I guess additional context, is the mastermind that you're talking about also stemmed from another or a community that we were both a part of. And that community that was still relatively nascent started this idea of masterminds, which is what formed these 4-person masterminds that you're talking about. And even before you and I met in the context of this mastermind, I just remember in the community itself, like in this case, it was a Slack chat, but in the Slack chat of this community, there was, 700 or 800 people in the community at the time. This is a few years ago, obviously. And I just remember that it was you, me, and maybe a handful of other folks that were very active in the community chats, questions, advice, all that kind of stuff. So I'd already seen your name and your Slack posts and comments in a bunch of places before we even met in the mastermind. And then I got paired up in this group of 4 people, so 3 other people and myself, for the launch of this mastermind. We were one of the 2 or 3, I think it was, pilot groups that launched this mastermind program as part of this community that I just referenced. And similar to my comment I just made about being active in Slack, I felt like I was pretty active, or an active member of this mastermind that we were a part of. And maybe not I didn't feel as much from the others. It was very much, there was a facilitator that helped facilitate each of these calls on a regular basis, which helped a lot. And then the minute this facilitator stepped out or didn't join the meetings anymore and we're supposed to be off the training wheels, and that's just the four of us in this mastermind going at it by ourselves, the energy, the dynamics, the conversations, the accountability just weren't there as much. It worked, it still worked, but I just remember having that feeling, as well as after going through that for a little while, one of the four members had to drop for personal reasons. They could not continue to attend these different sessions that we had every week, and they wanted to fill that now new gap for this foursome mastermind, and that's when you entered the picture. And I remember telling myself pretty immediately as you joined exactly what I felt and observed, like looking at the Slack community that I referenced earlier, that as soon as you jumped in, that liveliness, that communication, that back and forth, that kind of dynamic conversation, collaboration just picked right back up. And that's when, in a sense, I remember telling myself I could see something. I like this guy. So that's the backstory on the particular mastermind, or at least how I remember it, because this is now a few years ago.
Yeah, no, I appreciate hearing that. And I'm glad, because when I showed up, I was very hungry to connect and very hungry to find a group that I could have that ongoing dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I observed the same thing in the broader Slack. There were hundreds of people. I was so stoked to just like initiate conversations, get tactical in the weeds, and share information. But to your point, it was like only a few of us that were actually doing it. So the funny other side of that story, right? I was bugging the coaches in that community to let me into a mastermind, but they kept saying they had no openings. So finally, when this original fourth person dropped out and they let me in, I was all gung-ho and ready to go. It's funny how there's...
And we could tell you were definitely excited to join, and we were happy to have you. It was great.
Yeah. And so in a sea of communities and accountability groups, maybe you and I are a bit biased because we've been part of a number of different communities like that. It's pretty rare for something to stick together for a couple years like that group we had. We met pretty regularly, almost weekly. Sometimes people would take a week off here and there for personal stuff. But we kept it up for quite a while, and it had a good culture. And I think ultimately that's part of what led us to obviously A, get to know each other, but B, come up with this idea of, hey, how can we create something that embodies our favorite elements of what we did in this small group and also what the broader community could provide, but maybe make it geared a little more to people that were just like us, looking for the same things as us. And that actually leads me to a golden question, which is, what is the Remote Real Estate Academy, and why did we form it? So I would love to hear your answer to that, and then I can add any color if needed.
So putting me on the spot, I see. Okay, so I can't mess this one up. No, but all joking aside, I guess what is the Academy? The simplest way to put it is it's an online course, a community of motivated, eager, hungry real estate investors, and a coaching platform, essentially. It is tailored to, it's built, I should say, just like FUBU, it is built by and built for busy professionals, busy family men and women, people who have a W-2 or a family that they happen to want to stick with, happen to want to just continue to support, cherish, and thrive in. That's whether it's the family side of stuff or the W-2, the full-time job side of things. And at the same time, either start or continue to grow and scale their real estate investing business to ultimately provide more income and generational wealth for their families. And so that's what it is. And I think to answer your other question about where did it come from or how did it start, I'll give you my take and then you give me yours and we see if we aligned just by happenstance or if there's actually something here. But given what I just said, I'm a strong believer that I come from a place of abundance mindset. It is possible as long as you're organized, driven, you have the hunger, the desire, the organization, the tools, the people in your life and world. You can achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. And if you were in a situation where you want to do several things, like a full-time job, maybe being a husband, a father, a parent, if you have an arts passion, whatever it may be, that you can do all of those, that you have an and in between those things instead of these things having to be mutually exclusive. And what I was passionate about starting, especially when you and I started having conversations about starting the Remote Real Estate Academy, had everything to do with the fact that our mindset and our desire for building this community platform, course, coaching ecosystem and platform was really coming from that place of abundance and setting things up so that people could keep those things and add ands to their different kind of dimensions of their lives, versus what, to me at least, seems to be the more common kind of narrative and spiel across podcasts, internet, books, YouTube, you name it. Usually when folks talk about real estate investing, it's usually framed along the lines of start real estate investing so that you can quit your job. Start real estate investing so you can get rid of the golden handcuffs, or start real estate investing so that you can change or drop this other thing. And I think just like you, and I'm curious to hear your take here in a second, it was important for me to work on something and build something where you didn't have to make that choice of I'm doing this so that I could stop that, because I'm perfectly happy in my W-2. I love what I do. It does not drain me, quite the opposite. I'm a present father, I hope, or I tend to believe. I also believe I'm a decent enough and present enough husband. Of course, you can always do more. But my point being is I could do all those things well and do real estate without needing to sacrifice one or the other.
100%. And the whole brand that I put together prior to us partnering up was the hybrid real estate professional, right? And that whole concept is predicated on the idea that we have skills, we have income, we have some sort of secure, stable foundation with our jobs and our careers that we can build upon and use it to start investing in real estate, scale that. And there's not necessarily a reason to cut that off if it's not hurting you. And to your point, like the prevailing narrative across the real estate influencer and coaching space is like, how do we agitate that pain that you might be feeling in your job and sell you on the dream of quitting? And I think you and I both feel very aligned about not necessarily pouring fuel on that fire.
Yep.
Yes, real estate is a vehicle that can provide that outcome if you pursue it a certain way and go after a certain type of strategy. The type of strategy that we are focused on is not the how do I leave my job in 12 months strategy.
Yep.
And we're clear about that, right? So when we're now starting to market this academy we've built and launched, we're not marketing it with that outcome in mind. We're marketing it as how can you layer on this incredibly valuable, potentially legacy building activity of investing in real estate to enable the future that we want for our families, not only in our lives, but potentially in generations to come.
Yep.
And so I think that message is a core tenet of the academy. And it's one that so far, we're about 6 months in. We're recording this in mid-June. We launched the academy. Basically, I looked back at the very first message I shot you about it. I think it was October 28th. And so, yeah, we're a little over half a year in. And so far, the people that we've attracted and run through our program kind of fit that same mold. That message resonates with them. And I do want to do a quick look back of kind of what we've done over this first period of time, who we've brought within the community, and what's maybe some of those commonalities are. So yeah, we'll retrace the first few weeks pretty quickly because frankly, for me, it was a bit of a blur. So when I reached out to Nathan, again, we had known each other for a long time, but I basically said, hey, I've been coaching some people for a while. He knew that, and I knew that he had been coaching people. I said, I can tell we have almost exactly the same style of who we're trying to reach out to, and even how we just approach and message our coaching packages. I've been thinking of launching a community for a long time. I've seen you hint at launching a community for a long time. Rather than go at it separately, why don't we combine forces? And I was even a little bit afraid to ask the question, but it was met with a positive response. And I think pretty quickly we saw areas where we could complement each other's strengths. So we had a strong, unified vision, but we were bringing different skill sets to the table. And so I don't want to do all the talking on this section, right? I think we found pretty clear lanes for ourselves. And so maybe it'd be fun to just describe what our rules are within the community so far.
Yeah, and even before jumping into that, Aaron, from my perspective, when that part of the journey started that you're describing now, it was also going back to the comment I just made about being able to do all the things that you want to do and not have to trade off or trade one thing for another. I had, obviously, as you just mentioned, been dabbling in launching some form of community platform, coaching program or business and whatnot myself. So I had an understanding of the effort it would take and the time it would take to do and launch such an endeavor. And then when you reached out, one of the first things I remember telling myself, not to minimize anything that you are or bring to the table, but my hyper simplistic brain also very quickly went to, we're combining forces. So it's a who, not how, one of the greatest books out there. But it's like, if we partner up and combine forces, we will be able to do more, spending less of our individual time, and therefore adding one additional stream, side hobby, passion, whatever you want to call it, and not have to give something else up, like W2 or playing golf in my case, or family. That's where my mind went straight to when we started those conversations, and it panned out to work well because, to your point, I think we have very complementary skills, right? My background, and I can't remember how much I shared and what I said in our episode last time I was on, but I have a background in engineering, software engineering, technology, and people. I'm just passionate and know quite a bit about the just technology space in general and technology tools in general. So I have a knack, and it's very easy for me to think about these systems, think about these automations, think about the kind of behind the scenes or under the hood, if you will, technology components of what we're building, in this case, Remote Real Estate Academy, but or any other business for that matter, and just go in and implement the tech and automation side as quickly and as best I can so that we could then focus on where we provide more value, right? In content, in helping, in coaching, and providing our years of experience. And in your case, which is one thing I knew I didn't have and do terribly, terribly, horribly, is copywriting and just writing content. It's not one of my strong suits, and you're much better at that. And that's something that you were passionate about and wanted to bring to the table. And that's just one very obvious and simple kind of example of where our skills are very complementary for the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty incredible how quickly we were able to divide and conquer. Yet at the same time, when we were charting out what's the vision and how do we want this to look, like, we were both very comfortable making decisions together.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was easy for us to see, like, anytime there was something that, required discussion or maybe we had a differing point of view, we were able to get past it pretty quickly and or workshop it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did most of this asynchronously. Right? Like, one other big piece of context here, October 28th, I sent that message. November 30th, my twins were born. And so
Yeah.
I was a man on a mission in the month of November. Poor Nathan had to deal with a bajillion messages from me and drafts of business plans. I was certainly potentially a coping mechanism of like, hey, I gotta spell out what the future is going to look like before this big change comes.
Mm-hmm.
But we really rapidly put together a full business plan with a 12-month outlook and even some financial targets and a product roadmap and all that stuff. And it was a lot of fun, right? That first couple months was really, we got to really spell out the vision for what we were trying to build. And it's one thing to dream, but it's another thing to map it out in great detail and say, okay, like, if we want to get here in 12 months, here's what we need to do over the next 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say just one of the biggest challenges is that I've always had across my whole life, but especially with this endeavor, is being patient and letting it play out.
Mm-hmm.
So far, that plan that we mapped out in November, we've stuck to. We've executed
for the most
things
part,
that we said, for the most part. But the big pieces, like, and we'll go through some of those in a minute here, we've done what we said we were going to do, and we're at the point where more or less where we said we were going to be, which is not easy to do at the beginning of a business when everything is at a variable pace and you're still exploring. It's a lot easier to forecast year 3 of a business than it is the first 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love, just your quick take on like those first few months.
Actually, we can jump into that. I'm curious to hear from you, Aaron. why you think we've managed to succeed, at least in this definition of success, that we, in October, November last year, we, on paper, set this big plan out with a lot of moving parts that we can get into in a minute here. And so far, we've been able to track almost to the dot precisely on that plan, or track to that plan. I'm curious, why do you think that's the case?
Yeah,
Despite everything, right? Despite you having kids, we have full-time jobs, vacations, sick kids. I had a death in the family recently, broken arm for our daughter. Life happens, yet we're still pretty much right on track, right? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? I think a lot of that boils down to the early work we did to spell out in great detail. I think our business plan was 25 pages. It included competitor analysis and research.
Mm-hmm.
I looked across all the communities I was a part of. You looked across all the different experiences you had. We put all that together, and we really, before we even started really building anything, we had a plan. And I know that's not the way everyone operates. Some people just start building stuff and they fix it along the way.
Mm-hmm.
We've done some of that, but I would say it all anchored back to a really clear vision that we set out for ourselves. And I think it's important to have some flexibility in your vision. But the fact is that we had a clear idea of where we wanted to be in 12 months. The path to get there, we put on some guardrails so that, and we'll get to this in a minute, but I'm like shiny object squirrel man. Nathan is usually the one who has to reel me back in. But all the time, it was pretty easy. And he's done this before too. All you got to do is point back to the plan that we created and say, okay, does this align with what we said is important to us, or does it not? Is it in service of one of these larger objectives or not? And usually that was the defining characteristic. And also when it got busy, like you said, we had some personal stuff, some planned, some unplanned.
Yeah.
There's always things out of our control in our lives, and we're very busy to begin with. I think we've done a good job of identifying, if there's only one thing I can do this week, what is the most impactful thing that I can do? Even though we have a list of 50 things we could do, I think we've done a really good job of prioritizing, and that's what's continued to move the ball forward.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, very similar to that last comment of yours is what I was trying to get to, or at least what I was thinking. I think having the plan, and part of that plan, we actually broke it down into smaller pieces, like sequential pieces with specific milestones that we were targeting reaching. And that was important because I think having that allowed us to then, on a week by week or month by month basis or whatever, which is the other thing that I think is why it's working, and it has worked so far for us, is that we always held each other accountable. We just hold each other accountable to doing the things that we said we were going to do. And then even when life, quote unquote, got in the way, we'd still hold ourselves accountable and then fall to that mindset of, okay, life happened, but what is one step forward that I could take this week that'll help us get to that next milestone that we set out for ourselves? And we kept doing that kind of week in, week out. And all of a sudden, 6 months later, you have a twice sold out thing, right? So it works.
100%. And I think too, that's one of the benefits of a partnership, right? Like when I had the twins, obviously my schedule was completely uprooted. I wasn't in front of a computer hardly at all. So all that planning we had done up front, the things that I could do to move the ball forward in those first few months of their life were pretty limited. At one point, I was still on paternity leave when we were running our first cohort, which we'll talk about here in a minute. That was the only time I spent in front of a computer on any given week, was like at my desk, was for the live call of that cohort.
The hour and a half live call every week.
Yeah. Every other bit of work I did was either from my phone in the middle of the night or maybe on a computer in small little chunks when I found free time. And so we are very much living out we are living the strategies and the philosophy that we teach, right? Which is does boil down to pretty efficient time management. But I would say above time management is prioritization.
Yep, exactly.
And also just zooming out even further, it's like you and I are, when we introduce ourselves even, most of the time we lead with, hey, we're husbands and fathers. And that's intentional. And I'll say, hey, I'm real estate extraordinaire, Mr. Investor Man. No, I'm a husband. I'm a father of 3 young kids. I have a full-time job of which I've invested a lot of time and energy into growing along that career path. I'm invested in those skills, and those skills are what have enabled me to invest in real estate and now to build this business. And it does come down to understanding the different orders in which those things weigh into your life and making space for all of them too. So yeah, I hope that made sense, but I think that's how I think of it in my head.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's prioritization, organization, and just focus, right? If this is what you want to do, or if these things are the things that you want to do, all of them, not one or the other, you can do them, right?
Absolutely. And I think just on your question of like, how have we been able to get stuff done? I also think in our plan, there were a couple critical events, right? So the first one, which we should talk about now, is the cohort. So everything
Speaking
in
of babies, right? Are they in the background?
Oh, can you hear them? Yeah.
I can a
Yes.
tiny bit, but I didn't mean to interrupt. But point, or why I interrupted, I guess, is life happens. It's there, and we're still here talking, recording a podcast, right? We can make it
You
work.
bet. Yeah, the babies and my 2-year-old actually tried to come in a few minutes ago, but I have a little stopper on the door.
Smart.
'Cause she once barged into a meeting I was presenting in front of senior executives at my company, and that was fun. So now I put stoppers on the door. But yes, there are a couple kind of critical milestones in our plan that were non-negotiables, right? Like they were blockers.
Mm-hmm.
One of which was the cohort. So this idea is not new. We didn't think of this, but the idea we had was that Nathan and I both in our head had pretty clear framework for how we would go about buying our first long distance rental property if we had to start all over again. This is based on experiences that we had, some of which we had parallel experiences, some of it which we had pretty different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But the combination of our knowledge and experience, we created a sequence that we wanted to teach. And so we basically reached into our networks, and I have an email list, and Nathan had an email list. We reached out and we said, hey, we're going to run a live 12-week cohort in which we teach this sequentially. It's not pre-recorded. This is a live thing, and you'll have opportunity to ask questions all along the way.
Mm-hmm.
You can join whether you're red hot interested, you want to buy your first rental by the end of the course, you can join, or if you just really want to learn about this, you can join. And so we ended up pre-selling 16 seats to that cohort, which was our goal. We intentionally capped that. We did it at an affordable entry price. Comfortable saying it here. We did it at $500. It was basically just a proof of concept. Gave us a little bit of seed money for the technology we needed, and it gave people a little bit of buy-in into our community. And we ran it for 12 weeks straight, every Wednesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very busy, chaotic period where we had everything mapped out. It was all in our head, and we were creating the content and kind of rehearsing it and then delivering it usually 1 to 2 weeks in advance. All the while, we're also building some of this marketing momentum. That was when I started
and the platform itself, right? A lot of the technology pieces weren't there yet either, for at least not the way they are today, in the mature form that they are today. And the other thing you didn't mention is, like, every given week when we gave those live presentations, sharing our process, our content, our systems to eventually get ready to and eventually purchase your first rental, we would get a lot of live feedback from the cohort students, which then meant we would take that feedback and try to go incorporate it both in the content, the material, the tools, the technology, the communications, everything. So we're constantly learning, iterating, improving as best we could.
Absolutely. And it's even with 2 people, that is a lot of inputs. The technology, the communications,
Mm-hmm.
the delivery of the lessons, the answering of the questions, the engaging within the community, the soliciting feedback, the processing feedback.
Mm-hmm.
It was a busy cycle, and for good reason, right? Like that ultimately we gathered all of the content for our foundational course and all of the initial feedback that we needed to make sure that the more public official launch of this program was complete. It wasn't just that, hey, we
Mm-hmm.
threw out this completely unvalidated idea that we didn't even bother to ask for feedback on. It's like, no, this was built, the style of communication, like the layouts of the channels, which lessons resonated more than others. Did we miss something? We even went back and inserted a new lesson once we realized we had missed one component.
Mm-hmm.
It's all thought through and validated. And I thought that was a really cool, albeit very stressful, but a really cool phase of the build out.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, and then from there, that wrapped up. I mean, 12 weeks is actually a pretty long time.
It is,
to
yeah.
be
Full quarter.
in-
Yeah, it's long.
Yeah. But the idea was that it would turn it into something a bit more evergreen. And we have toyed with the business model quite a bit. There's a number of different ways we could do this. We could continue to run it as live cohorts, like what we did the first time, where it's very intimate. Everyone knows each other because they onboard at the same time. And there's a lot of benefits to cohort-based learning. But we landed on a more evergreen and a model that's a little easier to bring people in on a more recurring basis. With a cohort, you can only bring people in. If it's a 12-week cohort, the most we could reasonably do is 4 times a year with a 1-week break each quarter. And not only does that limit the amount of people we can serve, but it puts a lot of strain on us on top of all the other stuff we mentioned. And so we've come up with this model that's more of you have a membership to join the ecosystem. You get access to the courses, you get access to the community spaces. You're able to participate in certain workshops and networking events. And we have a whole slew of plans that we'll talk about here in a minute. But that's kind of vehicle. And then on top of that, we also have a couple coaching packages for people that are really in a season where they're ready to go and they want that like very hands-on support. Yeah. So the business model has evolved out of some of that feedback, and then also just living what we're preaching, which is we want to build this business to fit around the lifestyles that we want for ourselves while still being able to provide a great level of service. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
There's one thing I wanted to add, because I think we also changed and improved like a lot of the delivery of the content and the material throughout these first 6 months, to your point and what you're sharing now, how we changed from the group coaching to some more self-paced content. But those changes were not primarily driven by us wanting to get more people into the community or by us putting our quality of life, like yours and mine, first in building the platform and course content around that. It was also in response to arguably, I think, the most consistent piece of feedback that we got from the first 16 people. And if you think about what's available out there in terms of courses and coaching and boot camps and whatnot to learn Real Estate Academy, they usually fall into one of two, let's say 3 categories. One is like a very time-bound 10-week, 9-week, 12-week curriculum. Every week you go through something, which is what we did with our first cohort. There's a ton of those options out there. Another bucket of options to get started and learn this real estate stuff is there's some YouTube channel or some course that you might pay for. There's just a bunch of videos that you click through and watch, and you've gone through this stuff on your own. And then the third bucket is coaching. You have access to an expert or somebody with more experience than you do, and you access them either individually or in a group format. And the consistent feedback that we got from this first cohort is like, and I think this is arguably, I don't know that we want to get into debating this now, but when it comes to real estate investing, there's so many external factors: personal situation, personal finance, family, W-2, real estate macroeconomics, your markets, real estate dynamics, lending dynamics, so on and so forth. Won't get into all the gory details, but there's a lot of external factors that make it so that the pace at which each student will go through content to learn how to become an investor, that pace will be very different from person to person. And very quickly we noticed that in the cohort model, time-bound, 12 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is for your program, if you missed 1 week because you were too busy, you were sick, you were traveling for business or whatever, then very quickly people felt like they were behind and didn't find a way to catch up. So what we tried to do in this new model is not just give you the course only, go figure out on your own. Here's a bunch of YouTube videos or videos that you can watch and learn the content on your own. Solve for this time-bound boot camp kind of format where content is delivered live. and blend into this coaching aspect, which is why we have the model that we have now. But it's to solve those different problems that each of these kind of three buckets of education vehicles have.
No, that's a great call out. Yeah, it spun out of the feedback we got from that initial group. And I do think that one of the decisions that we have to make and be careful about making is sometimes if you try and serve everyone, you end up not serving anyone particularly well. But we figured by making the foundational course evergreen, which we had, like I said, that sequence where Nathan and I both were very in alignment on here's the order in which we would teach somebody, even teach our past selves to buy our first rental if we were doing it again. That stuff's pretty cut and dry. And we've sequenced it out in a way that we feel is very accessible for anyone, regardless of their background. We also know and feel that we have a lot to add on top of that. So if all we were able to do because of capacity was deliver that class over and over again, we would be eliminating our chance to add additional topics, additional workshops, additional conversations with experts, and things that could be of ongoing value to a community. And so that was another driver of the decisions. I think we're both feeling very happy about the way the model is evolving and the fact that even with two people, I was trying to add up how many hours I've spent and you've spent. It's got to be a couple hundred each, if not more. It's been a busy, and it doesn't sound like that much over a small period of time, but this is on top of all the other stuff we're doing and our jobs and our families and our own real estate. And that time was active. We haven't been twiddling our thumbs. We put a lot into this. And I think this chapter we're entering right now, which is the last, thing I want to cover in this episode, is an exciting one. Like, we have the infrastructure in place. Yes, there's still a lot to build, but ultimately, if somebody came into our community as of right now, mid-June 2024, they're walking in, they're getting access to us, and they're getting pretty much all of the tools that we have right from day one, plus all of the access to the future ideas and workshops and stuff that we're going to be putting out there. So maybe we...
and a community of other investors, because some in the community have yet to purchase their first rental. And in other cases, there are people in the community and community members that already have 10 units under their belt, I think, or something like that. So there's a lot of knowledge in people that you can lean on, or that one can lean on when joining, in addition to just having the full tool set, and the full map and process that you and I use every day, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not just us, right? So, it's a growing community of people who are really happy to support each other. And that's definitely an area we want to continue to feed, is the engagement within the community and the things we do to keep people supporting each other, interacting with each other, and growing their network. So I want to spend just a little bit of time with the remaining, let's say 10 minutes we have left, talking about what's ahead. I think that was a pretty good retrospective of what we've done so far, but I think that was really chapter one. And the next I'm really excited about, because it's, in a way, it's a clean slate. We have our core product defined. We have everything open for business. If somebody wanted to join right now, we don't have to build the scaffolding, so to speak, anymore. We're adding additional content and workshops and things like that. But let's just talk about the roadmap for a minute and what we want this next 6 months to look like now that we're, formally open for business. I'll let you start again.
Yeah, I was taking notes here because I'm trying to gather my thoughts and all the things that we want to do and not forget anything. But I think the bottom line is, simplest way to look at it is, now that the foundation is set and that we've launched, for lack of a better term, now it could be all about focusing on providing more value through providing more content, right? And some of the things that I'm personally looking forward to doing more of now that, like, this initial phase is behind us, is one, for example, is providing a regular, going to try to do it weekly, but like a weekly real estate investor news for busy professionals. Again, typically the people that are in this community, but I consume a ton of real estate investing information, podcast, books, YouTube videos, blog posts, articles, and whatnot. And what I'm trying to do is, like, all the stuff that I read, listen to, and watch in a week, keep the nice tidbits of stuff that is most relevant, that I found most important for, let's say, today, this week, and distill that into one piece of content that is much easier for people who are newer to the space and maybe don't have the time to go in and consume more quickly and then be able to go get more information if they want. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about, because we had a lot of this feedback in like the community today and like the first cohort and whatnot, people asking us, how do we manage to do all these things, right? How do we manage to do family and W-2 and real estate investing and podcasting and coaching and golfing in my case and all these different things? And what I've started doing and enjoying more and more is, as I find myself doing these things for my own portfolio and my own business, my own family, is just quickly hitting record and sharing. Say, hey, look, this incident happened at one of my rental properties. Here's what I do to deal with it, without draining myself of all the time available that I have, or free time available that I have, or without losing sleep over it, or how do I get my finances and bookkeeping in order so that I'm not spending 3 days doing taxes at the end of the year for my rental portfolio. And so all these little things that happen in the spur of the moment that I've built processes around, because it's been 7 years now, that I want to start sharing more of because it's easy to do. The other thing I'm excited to get going is to start podcasting with you a bit more and doing something along those lines, providing content that way. And what else? I don't know. We talked about bringing experts in, like obviously real estate investing related experts as guest speakers into either workshops, or is it podcast format or workshop format, and both, who knows, we'll see. But rental insurance experts, lender experts, real estate agents that work exclusively with real estate investors, other investors that have gone through growing pains, investing remotely, sharing their stories. Yeah, I don't know. Short answer is producing more content that hopefully will provide more value to the community. And that's what I'm really looking forward to doing now.
I love it. Yeah, so there was a lot there, right? Frankly, this is one of the benefits of packaging up the core course the way we did, is that that's built and we can divide and conquer now. You talked about your weekly financial news and your commentary on what that means to you as a real estate investor, what you do or don't do with that information, what's noise, what's signal, that type of conversation. Workshops we plan to run, which are going to be just really a glimpse into our brains, right?
Yep.
So like you said, maybe one of them will be how to minimize the amount of time you spend on bookkeeping and make tax time easier. Another one might be around what's the strategy we use to do our goal setting. How do we approach our even brainstorming and building this into our family plan, right? Whether it's financial or otherwise. We have one that we talked about called like the 20-minute a day investor. That's our one of our headline points is we believe that you can do everything you need to do in order to grow and maintain your portfolio in 20 minutes a day. So what does that actually look like? Yeah. Really being able to dig into that, something I'm very excited about. And as far as the podcast goes, I think there are a lot of podcasts out there, but one of the things we talked about is every piece of content that we create can ultimately be spread across a number of different mediums. So we'll be able to release it within the community. Certain bits of it will release to a podcast feed. That'll also be on our YouTube channel. That'll also be a piece of content that I can write and distribute in our newsletter, right? So I think we're going to seek as many of these opportunities for leveraging content and leveraging our time to continue to provide ongoing value. We're not just going to rest on the same thing over and over again. With that said, that core entry product is ready, it's available, and it is truly comprehensive. We believe if that is the only thing you ever consume from us, it'll give you everything you need to buy your first rental property anywhere in the U.S., whether it's in your backyard or 3,000 miles away. And so, yeah, just really excited about this kind of offer stack we've put together. And doors are open. We're ready. And like we were talking about with the community Nathan and I used to be a part of, we were both very responsive. We both really enjoy this. We like helping people. And if you're looking for that kind of quick feedback and response, you're going to get it.
So where do people go to get it?
Where do people go to get it? It's going to be at remoterealestateacademy.com. You're going to have everything you need to know about the program. And we, as Nathan alluded to, we're going to launch our podcast. So more details forthcoming on that. That'll be currently my plan is to run that in addition to this podcast. So this Hybrid Real Estate Professional podcast runs once a week. It's a pretty standard kind of interview format, a little more open. I envision, and Nathan and I talked about, the Academy one being a bit more tactical and more value-based, like how do we actually do the things we do? Whereas the hybrid one gets a little more macro and sometimes philosophical. But excited to have that outlet. TBD on the date of the first episode, but I think we want to let that be a pretty active channel for us so that we can reach people in a number of different ways. And so remoterealestateacademy.com is going to be your one-stop shop. We're almost out of time here. Nathan, anything else you want to tell the audience about the Academy experience so far or what's coming up?
I don't know that I have much to add, Aaron. I really think it's like for everyone who's hesitated or maybe even is just remotely interested in understanding how they could build generational wealth and potentially additional income as well through investing in real estate, which is an asset that you can control contrary to other investment assets, stereotypically the stock market. And you were always afraid that it would just drain every last living ounce of energy and minute of your day out of you. Then that's why we built this. So if that's you should come check it out and we'll be happy to help. We're always available, always active, jumping in, responding, and accessible in the Academy, email, Slack, everywhere. So come check us out.
I love it. This is the first of what I hope to be many conversations we have where we share behind the scenes of the business. It's been an absolute pleasure, his first chapter. I'm very grateful to all the work Nathan did. Super excited about the future and can't wait to see some of you guys inside. So with that, we will wrap it up. And thank you again, Nathan, very much for coming on.
Always a pleasure, Aaron. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.